everybody. Welcome. This evening we are looking at what has been happening with ShowMax and what is happening with the Competition Commission looking at Canal Plus's acquisition of MultiChoice. And my name's Jane Lippman. And for those of you who don't know me, I've been a member of the Documentary Filmmakers Association for many years. I'm currently on the board, and I'm a filmmaker producing with Africa Eye, an investigative documentary series that's broadcast on BBC World. I made a film about George Bezos that is on ShowMax. So welcome to all the DFA members, as well as those who are joining us as guests. And you can join the DFA by going to docfilmsa.com, and you'll be able to see the link that one of our team is going to type in the chat. So tonight's webinar is a discussion on the imminent closure of ShowMax. ShowMax is closing on March 31st. And last year, as we know, the French corporation Canal Plus acquired MultiChoice, and now ShowMax is shutting down. They made massive losses, and Canal Plus has called ShowMax unsustainable. They are restructuring MultiChoice aggressively and doing cost cutting across the business. The Competition Commission has investigated the merger last year, and the question now for us is, are the merger conditions being honoured? And what are the merger conditions, in fact? And that's why we've invited the Competition Commission to speak to the filmmakers, because there is a formal type of compliance review going on. So I want to kick off by, first of all, introducing Tamara Makoka, who's joined us from the Competition Commission, and she is the Divisional Manager of Mergers and Acquisitions. We have also Nadine Cloete, who's a documentary filmmaker who's produced for ShowMax, and she serves as the Nonfiction and Animation Production and Development Manager at the National Film and Video Foundation. We have Advocate Shuaib Rahim, a lecturer who specializes in competition law, and we have Richard Gregory, a filmmaker who produced School Ties, which just won a South African Film and TV Award, and he's worked with ShowMax. Shall we kick off with Tamara?
Hi, Jane. Yes, I'm here.
Hi.
Am I audible?
Wonderful. Yes, fantastic. Lovely to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. We do appreciate it. Do you want to kick off with explaining to us what happened last year and what is currently going on, perhaps?
Yeah, sure. I'll try to keep the technical language to a minimum so as not to bore you. But if there are any questions, I'm happy to cover that. So
Wonderful.
briefly, why did we get the transaction? Canal Plus had actually acquired up to about just over 40% of MultiChoice shares on the open market. And then what that did was it triggered a mandatory offer to all shareholders to buy them out, which would obviously have resulted in a change of control of MultiChoice. In South Africa, you have to notify a merger to us prior to implementation. So obviously that's why it was notified. Importantly, though, a South African broadcaster cannot be held by a foreign firm. So the actual entity within MultiChoice that holds the broadcasting license had to be carved out of MultiChoice and would be separate from, it wouldn't be acquired by Canal Plus. Although MultiChoice does have some representation on that entity, which is called License Co., it is a separate entity and held majority and owned by South Africans. And they had introduced some worker ownership and the likes into the License Co. entity. The rationale, as we understand it, was essentially about scale. So both Canal Plus and MultiChoice came under extreme financial pressure, as they said, from increased competition, particularly from your streaming platforms, and combining the two African giants, really, because they do have big footprints across the continent. It would give them scale, bargaining power, and the likes when it comes to negotiating licensing rights and producing content. So from a competition perspective, I mean, it's always a little bit strange because you see MultiChoice as this dominant firm, if not, some would even say approaching monopoly in South Africa. But there was no competition concern in this transaction because Canal Plus had no presence, so they weren't competing head on in the country, and even across the continent. Canal Plus focused on Francophone Africa and then MultiChoice, Anglophone. So there was no real competitive overlap. So the primary issues we had with the transaction were around the public interest. Now in South Africa, the Commission has a limited public interest mandate. We look at employment, at what the effect of the merger is on small firms or firms owned by Black South Africans to become competitive or enter markets. The effect on transformation, ownership, and then on international competitiveness. And this is really where most of our conditions arose. So we had concerns, in a merger, essentially, if I use employment as an example, there's almost an implicit contract. There's an explicit contract, but there's an implicit understanding between workers and then owners of firms. Then a merger breaks that link. So in this transaction, a lot of our concerns centered around MultiChoice having had this particular role to play in the South African audiovisual space, nurturing firms in some cases. They had spent on various CSI initiatives, obviously commissioning some content and also exporting it across the continent where they had a presence. So the question to us was, it has this effect in the sector, in this audiovisual sector. What implications then, if a foreign owner takes over this entity, is that contract, that implicit contract, broken, and would they have the same interest in continuing these activities? So to remedy those concerns, essentially what we did was we imposed a condition on merger-specific employment. So the integration between the two companies should not result in any forced retrenchments. And I say forced.
No forced retrenchments.
No forced retrenchments. I say forced for a reason, because voluntary retrenchments are excluded from the definition of merger-specific retrenchments because employees agree to them by their nature, right? And also there would be no change in the terms and conditions of employment. So sometimes in mergers we find, the jobs continue, but pay is reduced or benefits are reduced. So there was a commitment to that. And then the other conditions were essentially to kind of engineer, for lack of a better word, some commitment by Canal Plus to South Africa, and to incentivize almost South Africa positive action, right?
Right.
They made a commitment to commissioning, acquiring, and producing content. There is a global figure, which is confidential, but generally
they did make a commitment to commissioning local content in South Africa.
Yes.
Okay.
In South Africa, yes. Importantly, that is both sports and other. So both sports and entertainment. So it's commissioning, it's acquiring, and it's producing. It is platform agnostic. So I think that's important because the closure of ShowMax does not affect the quantum of the commitment. The commitment was made by the merged entity, so it could be fulfilled by MultiChoice, Canal Plus, or License Co. So all three are bound and contribute to that amount. At the moment, of course.
Sorry, what did you mean? Can I just ask you, what did you mean by the word agnostic, Tamara? What does that mean in this case?
Linked. So the value wasn't linked to any particular platform. So we didn't say you must commission content for DSTV or for ShowMax or for,
Okay.
So yeah, it could be, it's just that all three entities had to invest in commissioning, acquiring, and producing content.
Right.
In my final remarks, I'll come to whether or not that can change. So I'll park that for now. Then the second issue was around plurality, and I knew I'd have to say that word twice, plurality of South
Yes,
African news. So there's a
right,
specific commitment to renew the SABC news channel for a further 5 years beyond its current contract.
right.
So this was, again, as I said, it's this commitment to kind of ensuring that the South African news content has almost pride of place on the platform, right? And it's
Right.
not off-boarded. There are also various other commitments. So several other news channels. The exact number is confidential, but for a period post merger, there have to be several channels that produce South African news content on the platform. There's also a commitment to, if they acquire the rights to sporting events of a national interest, they should license those, obviously on commercial terms, to the national broadcaster. That Canal Plus would undertake a secondary inward listing onto the South African Stock Exchange, so that South Africans can participate in the company.
Right.
And then there was also a best endeavors commitment. So this one is not strong in the sense that I can say, Jane, by end of year one, X will happen. But it's a best endeavors commitment for Canal Plus to export South African content into other markets where they are. Yeah. But as I say, this one is, they have to show us that they've taken reasonable steps. But if they fail, it's not something that we could necessarily hold against them, but they have to try.
Are they legally obliged to do all those things that you're talking about?
So this has the effect of a high court order, essentially. A commission condition is like a high court order. And you have to comply with it under threat of quite severe sanctions. If they are found not to comply with a condition that they agreed to, they could be fined, and the fine can be up to 10% of a previous financial year's turnover. So it's quite revenue, so it's quite big. Or a merger can actually be undone. Now, I must hasten to say that this has never happened, but perhaps it is because the sanctions are so severe. If there's an allegation of breach, then people generally take corrective action because the consequences are quite serious. My final point really was then just about the closure of ShowMax. So kind of what, right? But maybe before I get there, you did ask a point about other complaints, make a point about other complaints. We did see in the press that some of the suppliers to MultiChoice were concerned about the imposition of discounts and delays in payment of invoices for services rendered. Now, the conditions also say that where you have small, medium, or micro enterprises supplying you, or firms that are owned by historically disadvantaged persons, essentially Black South Africans, the terms with which you engage with those firms cannot be worse than they were prior to the merger. So when these issues were raised in the media, we wrote to MultiChoice and said, this looks like it could breach that condition. And they did take corrective action. So that process is kind of nearing completion. That's a good example to show that although it's only been a few months since implementation, where there are concerns, we do immediately kind of reach out to them and request that they comply.
That's good to hear.
The closure of ShowMax does not require our approval. So this is a question I've received. Do you have to assess it? No, it's an operational decision. The spend commitment, as I said, and the amount that they agreed to remains the same. And it could be spent across the other platforms, whether that be, DSTV, Canal Plus, or DSTV Stream, or whatever it is. But what we are investigating is whether the closure does trigger retrenchments that may contravene the conditions. And whether, and essentially when there is a big change in a business post-merger approval, we also check whether the firms could reasonably have known or took that decision prior to obtaining approval. Because you have to be frank with the commission. So if this was something that we uncovered, if there's evidence that this could reasonably have been foreseen or was decided prior to approval, then that could also trigger some consequences.
And
Yeah,
very interesting,
let
very
me leave it
interesting.
there. Yeah,
Okay, let's leave it there for now. It's very interesting. I want to go straight to Nadine Cloete, who is a filmmaker from South Africa, maybe, and with the National Film and Video Foundation, maybe for some immediate responses to that. Nadine?
Yeah, my immediate response to that is it seems like there's some hope.
Mm,
One tends to, I think, with ShowMax shutting down and the merger, there's been high anxiety within the film sector and filmmakers, right? And also, of course, for me personally, because working for the National Film Video Foundation and still continuing to make films, I can't,
yes,
I'm not allowed to benefit from government funding, right? So ShowMax Multi-Choice is kind of where I can play and I can access. So
sure.
it's really interesting to me. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing that information. It's I will say it leaves me with a sense of hope for now.
No, exactly. I completely agree. It feels like, there are things developing that we should all know about. And,
Yes,
we need more information as filmmakers from people like Tamara. I just
yeah,
want to now also go. I'm going to move quickly here because I think a lot of people are going to want to ask questions. But thanks, Nadine, and we hope you're going to contribute more. I just want to move quickly now
sure.
to Advocate Shuab Rahim for his response to what Tamara said.
Okay,
Yeah,
good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Jane, and thank you, Tamara.
no, thank you.
I fully agree with Tamara's contribution, and thank you very much to the Competition Commission, which is really a strategic partner here, definitely not the enemy.
Mm,
They play a very important strategic role within South Africa and the economy, and it's actually a very exciting, dynamic piece of legislation, which I think is not necessarily fully or understood.
mm,
And for a merger of this particular scale, it would have gone through two broad processes. Number one, it would have, had to go through compliance in terms of the Companies Act of 2008, shareholder approval, offering of fair value, and as Tamara said, by the fact that Canal Plus had strategically actually purchased shares over a number of years, they reached a particular threshold where, in effect, the controlling interest had shifted.
yeah,
Now, the important thing about that was really from a competition law perspective, what would this new merged entity and the potential impact on competition be in a particular market? So, in this particular instance, we would then argue whether or not it would create or speak to this ideal theoretical construct of what competition should be: free, fair, equal competition, effective, equitable prices, quality production, affordable, reasonable choices to us to benefit consumers. All of which,
mm,
the Competition Commission has dutifully done. The key thing here, potentially going forward, would be the impact of dominance. And Tamara mentioned this debate about the issue of monopoly. And monopoly in our vernacular tends to have a very negative connotation. But in terms of competition law, it isn't by itself a bad thing. I mean, if we look at protecting intellectual property, that's a legal form of protecting your particular, the product, and creating a monopoly for you to be able to regulate how that should be distributed and how you should legally profit from it. So,
right.
in the same way, here we are not interested necessarily with simply dominance, but the abuse of dominance, and the abuse of market power that could possibly come from this. Now, what led to this merger or takeover, depending on how you want to construct it, is really because DSTV and MultiChoice Africa was not really keeping up with global trends. It wasn't delivering a particular service that could compete with really the large giants in the streaming world. And I mean, anecdotally, as a legacy DSTV premium subscriber, I recently had to make a surprisingly difficult choice to switch to streaming.
Mm,
That said, looking at MultiChoice, Africa, their solution was that I had to cancel my subscription, and I literally have to physically call a head office to now
mm,
apply to become a streaming member. So I haven't had time to do that. So currently, I don't have access to MultiChoice.
mhm.
But I do still have to ShowMax. So,
Until
what
March 31st.
until March 30, yeah. Well, actually, until
Mm,
April. March 31st, they're not going to accept any new subscribers. But it's going to
right,
be at the end of April that ShowMax will now formally be subsumed into its parent company. Now,
right.
the interesting thing about that, and tomorrow's 100% correct, it's an operational thing. The fact that the entity known as Showmax has really lost billions over the last few financial years is not sustainable. So
Mm,
the board of directors would actually be in breach of their fiduciary duties if they hadn't taken remedial action. The shareholders themselves would be able to hold them potentially even personally financially liable, should they continue as they have. Another important point to mention is that Canal Plus, as it stands, is not necessarily globally dominant. It definitely is dominant within France and certainly Francophone and African markets, but it's the strategic combination of Canal Plus and MultiChoice that is significant for our conversation because the footprint is not only now going to cover South Africa, but really extend across the African network. So, what do I
mm.
mean by that? Strategically, it was actually a very good opportunity for them to purchase MultiChoice Africa because they've now tapped into in-house resources. They've tapped into local content creators. So they don't have to spend large amounts of money and huge capital to invest to create new platforms or new media or new content. They can tap into existing content providers. So there's a potential here to negotiate really favorable terms and conditions for
Okay.
local content producers. So what I'm saying is that this isn't all doom and gloom.
Yeah.
If there are
And
potential,
are they, sorry to interrupt you,
no,
apparently it's very interesting. And apparently they are creating their own a Canal Plus platform, which is
yes,
one centralized global kind of Canal Plus ecosystem.
yes.
Um, so can you
So
tell us a bit more about that, maybe?
this also is actually quite a logical progression. At the moment, if you try to access the MultiChoice streaming app, I mean, it's really square pegs and round holes. It's quirky, it's cumbersome, it isn't particularly intelligent. So, and also comparatively speaking, quite expensive. If you look
Mm,
at, Netflix, Amazon Prime, and the whole basket, paying for a premium subscription to DSTV would actually cost you more than all of the others combined. So it actually is a natural progression for them to actually move towards a far more sophisticated, coherent streaming service platform that would then bring all of the content under one particular space as opposed to having to try and find different things in different areas. So once again, I think that this is a material opportunity for creatives and film producers and directors and what have you to be able to join in as they are developing the platform right now.
wonderful. Well, thank you very much for explaining it in that way. It's very, it's kind of one door closes, another door opens, and it's fascinating. I want to jump straight through to Richard now,
Yes.
and find out his reaction to what everybody has said as a filmmaker who's had some very successful films on Showmax. Richard, do you want to respond to what you've heard so far? It's been very
Yeah,
interesting.
sure. I'll be honest, I don't have a huge amount of insight more than what a lot of other people do, people who have just been keeping an eye on what's been going on, what's been announced. Um, Surprisingly, I kind of hoped I'd be able to figure out more than most people, but to be honest, we kind of a little bit in the dark as well. Um, what, for example, today, the 26th, yesterday was meant to be the launch of my new show, The People versus VBS, on ShowMax, and that was going to be a simultaneous launch between ShowMax and Mnet. About a week later, that's now shifted to launching on. It's basically going to be the first ShowMax original that will be launching as ShowMax comes home to the DSTV platform.
Right.
What that
So
means
will
in
it be
practice.
on DSTV Stream? Where will it be,
Exactly.
Richard?
So
Okay.
what that means in practical terms is that DSTV Stream is getting a Showmax channel, I guess you'd call it, that all of the Showmax original content is going to be placed on. So, and as well as it's going to be on Mnet, I believe, also from the 1st or the 2nd of April. So it's going to be on linear TV, in other words, programmed TV, as well as on demand on the DSTV Stream platform on this new sort of Showmax strand that's been created. So
Okay.
great to see that it's being launched. I guess we've got the honor of being the first Showmax original as it goes back to DSTV, but it's been a little bit of a strange limbo space to be in because we've been working on it for a year and a half and a lot of investment that has gone into that.
Mm,
So that's where it stands. You know, as Shoaib was saying, the downside I think at this point is that the DSTV Stream app is not great. And
right.
I think we can say that without offending anyone at MultiChoice. I'm sure they'll admit it as well. And I think part of the reason for that is that that app is actually doing a lot of heavy lifting. You know, it's
Mm,
got linear TV that you can go to what's playing live on all the DSV channels, a couple of hundred of them. It's got on-demand TV of, you know, all the what used to be called DSTV catch up or whatever it's called now, and you can play as you want to. And it's got live TV in terms of live sports. Um, so it's a lot that one app is doing, far more if you think about it than something like a Netflix app is doing, or even the Showmax app was doing, anything like that. So it kind of stands to reason that it's going to be a suboptimal experience unless a whole lot of effort is put into that. My
mm.
understanding, and again, this isn't from any insider knowledge, is just from what I've heard, is that the Canal Plus app, as others have said, is going to be rolled out in time. I don't know what the timeline is on that. Did I miss that? Did anyone else speak about the timelines? We don't know what the
Um,
timeline is on that.
I don't think we know what the timeline is on that.
Yeah.
What I have heard is that this restructuring at Canal Plus is going to take at least the next April, May, June, July, sort of 4 or 5 months of a
Mm.
process. So I wouldn't think that we'd see things, you know, it's going to take a few months. That's what I hear. I'm not sure if anybody else has any further information on that. But please continue, Richard, for now.
So my hope is that if and when the DSTV Stream app is replaced by the Canal Plus app, that is now also including a whole lot of content for Anglophone Africa and South Africa, we'll actually have a better streaming experience of all those things that we want. My personal hope, and something I've been kind of advocating for years, is that they divide it into bouquets for what you're looking for. Otherwise,
Hmm.
you might get bloat and you've got packages that cost over R1,000 for when people keep on saying, but I just want it for live sport, you know, things like that.
Hmm.
So hopefully they're going to be doing things like that that are going to make it more efficient, make it more streamlined. But I think that's what the future is going to look like. Look,
Sure.
I think there are a few upsides that, you know, some of the people tonight have mentioned as well.
Hmm.
One of them is that one of the downsides, let me put it this way, start from this point. Since
Yeah.
about 2 years ago, Showmax went Africa only. They geo-blocked their content to Africa only. Before that, it was international. And I think my understanding of the business decision there was that they realized they weren't going to be able to compete on an international level and be
Hmm.
rolling out all that international infrastructure. What they're rather going to do is geo-block it to Africa, where the core markets were, and take that Showmax original content that was created and then resell it to other streaming platforms overseas so that our local content
Right.
could still be seen elsewhere, but they weren't responsible for housing it. I've
Right.
got no idea how successful that strategy was or if our local Showmax originals have been screened on other platforms, but I believe that was the thinking. So one of the downsides of that, though, is that it meant that when we're working for ShowMax, we're only working for a local audience. As
Yeah.
opposed to one of the attractive things about working for Netflix is that they're an international platform, and
Yeah.
some of our South African productions that we made for Netflix have done very well internationally. And
Mm.
Netflix being the international platform they have, it's got the legs to spread it. And so that's like a nice boost for some of the South African production companies and filmmakers who've managed to work for Netflix.
Sure.
The downside, of course, on the documentary side is unfortunately Netflix hasn't commissioned much documentary work yet. I'm going to throw a big yet in there if hopefully someone from
Mm.
Netflix is listening, because I do
Mm-hmm.
see this as an opportunity for them as well to come in and, help get some amazing content to filmmakers who want to get their work out there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but to get to my long-winded point,
Mm-hmm.
potentially Canal Plus is an opportunity for us to now have a more international platform again for our South African created content. So something we
Sure.
create here, if Canal Plus thinks it's got legs elsewhere, this can now be made truly international. So I'm seeing it as a potential upside. Hopefully I'm not
Sure.
being too optimistic about that.
And if
Uh,
you had a question or a query for Tamara, who we
uh,
know we have an opportunity here from the Competition Commission, what would it be, Richard?
So I have one quite specific one, and I strongly suspect tomorrow's not going to be able to answer it. So apologies tomorrow if I'm going to put you on the spot. You mentioned that there were figures put in the contract that Canal Plus will need to continually commission, acquire, and license local content. Is that correct?
Commission, acquire, and produce.
And produce. Okay.
Mm.
My first question is there a split between each of those, or is that just a bundle? Okay. My
Yeah,
second,
that's a global figure. And it
okay.
includes sport and other. Yeah.
Okay, that's unfortunate because it doesn't necessarily say that they're going to be commissioning how much they're going to be commissioning or producing. It could just be acquisitions, etc. But okay, my next question is there must have been figures in the contract negotiations that explain exactly how much MultiChoice had been spending on commissioning, producing, and acquiring content. This
Mm.
new figure that's in the contract, is it higher or lower than what was there previously? Are you able to
So
answer
that
that?
I can't tell you. But what I can tell you is in general, when we impose conditions,
Mm.
we use the pre-merger spend as a baseline. Let me leave it there.
Okay, so we're
Can I
talking
can
about comparable ballpark figures. We're not talking about wild discrepancies in the figures. Is it safe to say that? You just blink twice if you agree with me.
I'm going to respectfully decline
Okay.
to
can I
reply.
can I ask you, Tamara, for what reason? I mean, are these targets and what's going on not? I mean, you talked about the public interest. You talked
Mm.
about public interest and plurality, sorry, I also can't say that word, plurality. But public interest means that shouldn't we know a bit more about what's going on as the filmmakers
Yeah.
who produce the content?
I was asked this exact same question in Parliament last
Right.
week. And yes, that's true. I do think that this information should be public, in my personal view, and that's not the Commission speaking. But unfortunately, legally, we are bound, by a confidentiality claim. And of course, there is a reason for that. Like you do want to create in merger control a space where people know their information is safe. Otherwise, they would be hesitant to give it to you.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, I am with you. It's just that there are some constraints, unfortunately.
Okay. Okay, I want to throw this open now because I think we've got quite a lot of people that want to ask questions here, and I'm looking in the group chat as well. Do we have anybody that would like to ask people on our panel any questions? Should we start the discussion with that? I'm going to read you something here. This person is saying, I speak and hear weekly from providers to MultiChoice who have had their contracts cancelled and are letting people go. Daily, I hear from producers who say their series have not been renewed ShowMax, as well as CakeNet, Mzansi Magic, etc. And they can't give her the commitments to crew and cast and have to let people go. While MultiChoice can't retrench, retrenchment and job losses are now happening indirectly. Was any thought given that job losses would happen in this way when cost cutting does start? What do we have some responses to that? Tamara?
Yeah, so in terms of the conditions, I should specify that there's kind of a protected class of suppliers covered by the conditions, and then some that are outside. So the public interest provisions make specific provision to protect small firms, so SMMEs, and Black-owned firms. So if these retrenchments or cancellations are happening in firms outside of those protected classes, as I'll call it, there's very little we can do. If they are happening in SMMEs or Black-owned firms, then I think people should reach out to us and we can take it up as part of our conditions monitoring function.
Oh, people can reach out to you directly, Tamara?
Maybe not to me personally, but I can give
No.
you an email address. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, we could maybe take that. And then we have here, this is for
Jane,
the yeah.
sorry to interrupt, Jen.
No,
I
go
do
for it.
just want to comment on that because this is actually one of the things that's been concerning me most about all of this is that, you know, even if there are figures in place in a contract that talks about continue to produce and acquire and commission, all that kind of thing, my concern is that, you know, those of us who've been producing for MultiChoice for, it's been visible for the last, I'd say almost a year, that there's definitely been a slowdown in how quickly things are commissioned, in how long it takes to put things through to pitch for them. And it's because this acquisition has been in the works for so long, it's kind of, I think, being kicked down the road a little bit, you know, people not really wanting to commit too much. And my concern is that it is going to be an impact on our industry, almost like COVID on the restaurant industry. You know, there's a year or two where everything shuts down, and in that time, you know, restaurants go out of business, suppliers go out of business, they don't have restaurants to sell their produce to, that kind of thing. When it passes, you can't just start that industry up again. All those people have needed to go and find other jobs, other forms of income, and you've suddenly got this kind of hole of capacity in the industry. And my concern is that, you know, we might be heading towards this kind of black hole for a year or two, which is really going to have an impact that's going to take a lot longer than that to turn on again. It's not going to be as easy as just kind of turning on the taps. I don't know. I don't really have a question here. I guess this is just a bit of a fear, is that if things don't start moving quickly, those of us who do depend on multi-choice for a lot of our income, a lot of our work, it starts becoming far more of a riskier proposition and we need to kind of look elsewhere. And of course, this is compounded by chronic problems at SABC, compounded by Amazon's pulled out, Netflix isn't commissioning much in terms of the documentary space. ShowMax is gone. You know, all these things are kind of a little bit of a perfect storm at the moment. So I would like to ideally hear from Canal Plus that apart from, yes, things are going to be commissioned, how soon? Like,
Okay.
are we going to move quickly? Because that's going to be critical to a lot of people's lifelines.
Sure. Absolutely. Shuab, do you have any responses to what Richard's just been saying?
Thank you very much. It's really related to this question around retrenchments.
Yeah.
And I know that the negotiation said that, you know, for a particular time, there will no be, you know, forced retrenchments. But it's important for you to also be familiar with contractual terms and existing labor regulations. There is a potential risk, and there have been cases where individuals have voluntarily initiated a retrenchment process. So in other words, you know what, I've done enough. I know probably there's a possibility I'm going to be retrenched. I'd like to offer to be retrenched. Whereas
Mm.
that can actually be seen as a form of resignation. And if that is seen as a resignation, then you are actually not entitled to UIF and all the other employment benefits. So
Mm-hmm.
before offering or entering into a voluntary resignation process, please speak to a labor lawyer and consult them before actually entering into such an offer.
Sure, no, very good advice. I see a hand up. We have a hand up.
My question is picking up on what Richard was talking about directly to the Competition Commission. With regards to them, there was, as you said, there was a commitment to tomorrow to rolling out local content, right? Now, in that, was that commitment, was there a timeline given to that commitment? Does that mean that that commitment to rolling out the existing the local content, was it relevant to existing content? In other words, what the status quo is, or was there any mention of rolling out new, fresh content, and was there a timeline given to that?
Great questions. Tamara, do we have answers to that?
The conditions are framed as X amount over Y years. Both of those are claimed confidential. And it doesn't specify that it has to be new content. It just says that this X amount will be spent on acquiring, commissioning, and producing. Although the amount is not broken up into years, we do require annual reporting though. And the idea behind that was to deal somewhat with Richard's points around, if you can have, say you have 10 Rand over 10 years, you can spend the whole 10 Rand in year 10. So we tried to prevent that by saying report annually. And generally, when we monitor these conditions, we'll try to make sure that it's more or less an average of the total over the period, But
that benchmark then is based on what was already in existence, or was there a new benchmark? That's the question, I think. Is it
difficult for me to respond.
Less or more? Is it what there was that was already in existence, or has it changed?
Can you give us a very general answer, Tamara? Because, filmmakers are concerned about the future, if you know what I mean.
No, I do understand. I think I can, though at this stage, I can only leave it at what I said, which is that we usually do look at pre-merger spend as a benchmark as a starting point in our negotiations. So, I mean, that's pretty much all I can say, given the confidentiality claims.
Okay, let's go for the comments on the chat. So we have a comment here. Could you please kindly elaborate on the definition of the commitment they have in local content? You mentioned there's an amount that they are obligated to produce, acquire, license, and commission. Are they obligated to do all three, or could they simply put all that budget into only acquiring or only commissioning? And is there an update on the strategy from the new multi-choice Canal Plus on what they are looking for? Do we know?
So the condition specifically says that the merged entity, so it's Canal Plus MultiChoice and License Co, the one holding the license, will collectively spend the X amount on acquiring, commissioning, and producing. So legally, and Shoaib can help me here, but legally, the way we would interpret this as the commission is you shouldn't spend the whole amount on one. Otherwise, it would be meaningless to have all three categories.
Right.
So although it's not broken down into a specific amount per category, the spirit of the condition talks to spending this amount across all three.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they're obligated to do that tomorrow?
Yes, this is an order. They have to, yes. Barring, maybe I should say barring a COVID level event that might, and that could not have been foreseen at the time of getting into this condition. But it's very difficult to argue that. To change a condition is actually, it's quite a high bar. You have to show good cause shown and that you could not reasonably have foreseen it. And yeah, it really does have to be a bit of a unicorn event.
Okay. We have another question on the chat. Does anyone know, or is there room to ask about their terms of trade? Is it the usual commission and total ownership, or is there room to negotiate, discuss alternative financing models yielding a more equitable partnership between Canal Plus and local producers? In other words, can people negotiate their own contracts if they raise more money? For example, they don't just get funding for a specific project from Canal Plus and MultiChoice. Can they then negotiate a different kind of contract, perhaps? What do you think?
I mean, from
Tamara?
my side, I feel like this sounds like a question to Richard, but from
Yeah.
my side, this the conditions don't prohibit negotiations that are to your advantage, if I, in short. So basically, what we're trying to do is protect classes of suppliers or uh, peers
Yeah.
that might have less bargaining power. But if you can extract a better deal, that's definitely not something that would be frowned upon.
Okay, great. Richard, your
I
comment
don't
on that?
I don't actually have much to add here, I'm afraid. My recent work with MultiChoice has been only as a director. When I've worked with them as a producer, that's been further in the past. But
Right.
so I haven't been part of those more recent producer negotiations. My feeling, though, I don't think I'm wrong about this, is that it's too early really to figure out those sorts of nuances about what kind of deals can be done with Canal Plus. I get the feeling
Mm,
that they are still kind of finding their feet. Look, they are moving fast. The shutdown of ShowMax has happened fast. I think the changes have happened a lot faster than people expected, and I'd like to think that's a good thing because hopefully it means that it's kind of ripping off the band-aid and we're going to move on to what the next phase looks like quickly. But my feeling is that it's still too early to figure out, can you do a pre-sale deal? Can you do an acquisition and commission? Those kind of nuances I think are only going to be figured out down the line. And then
okay.
to somebody else asked, is there an update in strategy from the new MultiChoice on what they're looking for? I haven't heard any updates on what they're looking for. Again, my feeling is that it's a little bit too early in the process for them to issue new guidelines on what type of material they want to commission.
Okay. Shuab, do you want to come back in here maybe with any comments?
Thanks, Jane. I just want to, I suppose, support the position that if there are particular concerns with regards to actual competition matters, it's best to frame that within existing competition law. So, with regards to preferential treatment, whether or not there is tying or bundling, whether or not there is a discrimination in horizontal or vertical agreements, that helps the commission actually specifically target whether or not the claims or the allegations actually are substantially motivated in terms of breaches of competition law. And then the remedies are actually quite particular for any of those to follow. When it comes to the issue about the potential negotiation of contracts, we have a very robust system of contract law in South Africa, where we have, obviously the freedom to contract, the fact that, of course, there'll always be a disparity in issues around who really has the better bargaining position within any trade negotiations. But in the spirit of negotiating and contract, if you are able to actually bring more to the table, then that gives you a better opportunity to be able to negotiate better terms and conditions.
Okay, great. Okay. Nadine, any comments at this stage about what you've heard?
Thanks. I think it's just to echo the sentiment of having an idea of timelines as well as then guidelines of what what they are looking for. It's good to hear that there's a level of negotiation can take place. You can bring something to the table and that can be it's not immediately discarded. But yeah, I would say timelines or that's quite important to get an idea of that.
Sure. We have another question as well, which is that the commissioning process may now seem to need more signatures through France, through Paris, as compared to before. Before, obviously, people were dealing with MultiChoice in Johannesburg. Now it looks like, there'd have to be people signing off in Paris. Any comment on that, Tamara?
I suppose this is a consequence of the integration process, right? So maybe this will settle over time
Yeah.
as structures are localized, I suppose. Yeah, but nothing really to add there.
Okay, from Carolyn, what power do the South African BBBEE shareholders hold, such as 13th Avenue Investments and Patuma Nati have over Canal Plus? And are they like, what is the situation? What percentage does Canal Plus own in terms of the deal? Is it 20% or more? Because if as the industry, can we lobby the local shareholders to ensure that Canal Plus can't decide unilaterally what content will be commissioned? That's an important question. Tamara, can you answer that, please?
Yeah, so the shareholding of Putumanati, some new Black shareholders and the employee shareholdings, the trust that represents employees, that shareholding is held at License Co, the entity that has the broadcasting license, right? And that, as I said, and that's why I mentioned it in the initial slide, because it is quite important for this issue of who commissions content. So while MultiChoice is owned by Canal Plus.
Right.
MultiChoice doesn't have a broadcasting license. MultiChoice can supply content to License Co, but License Co decides what is being broadcast on the platform. So Putumanati, the Black shareholders, do have some say in terms of the content that License Co, of course, wants commissioned or will air. Yes.
Sorry, who is License Co? And they are bound by ICASA, is that right? I mean, they're subject to South
Yes,
African laws, right?
That's right, the Electronic Communications Act. So it used to be an entity within MultiChoice that held the broadcasting license, right? Then,
Right.
because a broadcaster can't be foreign owned, it had to be carved out of MultiChoice, and it's a separate entity, though with some business links with MultiChoice in terms of the provision of content. Yeah. So if it's a question about, yeah, it is a bit.
Who is License Co? Like what is License Co? It seems to be the controlling company. Is that right or not?
So it would be separate. So if we're talking about control, I think so we shouldn't really conflate MultiChoice with License Co.
Okay.
They're two separate entities. License Co holds the license to broadcast content.
Mm-hmm.
And then MultiChoice does all of that. It owns, for example, ShowMax, which is why they can take a decision to close ShowMax. It can commission content. It can supply that content to License Co, but it itself is not a broadcaster because it doesn't have a license to do that. I don't know, Shoaib, if there's another way of kind of simplifying this, perhaps. But this is legal. It's a legal question, really.
Yes. Actually, this was actually it was a very clever way to solve a particular problem, which is dealing with a controlling interest of a foreign company incorporated outside of the jurisdiction of South Africa that is now acquiring a target company, MultiChoice, in South Africa, listed in the JSE. As a foreign company, we have a limit as to how much a foreign company can own in terms of shares and a controlling interest in a domestically owned company. And as a consequence, a third entity was incorporated, and that was License Co. So License Co is the entity incorporated in South Africa, which then facilitated the licensing agreement with ICASA. So ICASA now actually has given the license for distribution, content creation, everything else to License Co, which also then meets the BBBEE shareholder requirements, which are obligatory under a domestic legislation, which obviously it solves that predicament about foreign companies not being compliant with our important equitable restorative economic programs that, are particular to our South African economy.
Sounds like
So,
there were some very clever lawyers working on this deal, guys.
yes, this was actually set as a case study for my company law class in anticipation of this merger.
Right.
So this was actually their question that they had to try and resolve, and how we were actually going to deal with the triple BEE concerns, looking at these two multinational corporations. So this was a very elegant solution to this particular problem.
Okay.
So
Very
in effect, there
interesting.
are three parties really to this agreement, with Canal Plus actually, largely giving the international or the foreign direct investment that is really needed to actually take all of this into the 21st century. I hope that
How
helped.
much money did they put in?
I can't say.
So
I,
over 50 billion, is that right? Rand. Something like that. Anyway,
it is, yeah,
Ramadan.
it's a large, yeah, it's a considerable sum.
Yeah.
Because while the legal structure of multi-choice and license co, etc., in terms of the
Mhm.
foreign ownership, I understand it's only allowed to be 20%, I think. The
Yeah.
Pranati shareholders is what DSTV put in place many, many years ago, right in the beginning. And then
Yeah.
the 13th Avenue, people like Sipho Maseko, who's the former CEO of Telkom, etc., as well as other people that were with Transnet. And they paid, according to what I've seen, 287 million, which they got the money from the PIC for, to pay for their
Right.
shares, to buy into, is it license co, what you're saying? But what I still don't understand is, what my question is, in
Mm.
terms of the South African shareholders and as an industry, surely we can lobby them and we can make sure that Canal Plus cannot decide unilaterally how they want to operate in this country. Nobody's answering that question. Yes, so they're commissioning as multi-choice, they own it, but they don't have the license. So if they own multi-choice, are you saying just by the nature of them owning, are they the majority shareholder of multi-choice? Therefore, they can decide whatever they want. And therefore, as South
Mm.
Africans, we have no recourse?
Mm. Okay, Tamara, please answer that question.
Yeah, well, I think that this structure was designed in order to prevent exactly that, right? So while Canal Plus can solely make decisions around multi-choice, it cannot do so around license co.
Right.
Because that entity, even if it owns 100% of multi-choice, it can only own up to 20% of license co. You see, so that's not a controlling stake in the entity that actually decides kind of, I suppose, at a base level, what to air. So there is scope, I think, to speak to the South African shareholders in direct response to that question around the kind of mix of content, around the commissioning, around what the strategy should be.
Right. There's a few issues here I want to raise. I think about 4 to 5.
Sure.
Let me start with the amount that was paid for the transaction.
Yeah.
According to Le Figaro magazine in Paris,
Mm-hmm.
they quoted the highest purchase Canal Plus has ever made in the world, which was 54 billion rands.
Right.
That's one. Two, I feel that this whole transaction purchase that took place of multi-choice,
Mm.
let us move back to Paris when Netflix came to the French environment requesting licensing.
Mm-hmm.
They went to the CNC, which is your organization that caters for the entire industry.
Yeah.
And yet in South Africa, we have an organization that might sound like a swear word, the NFVF.
Yes, Ramadan.
They should be in this room
Well,
speaking on behalf of industry.
yeah.
With due respect to the Competition Commission, I know it is their job, But the organization that we should be dealing with is the NFVF, who should have done all that we needed to learn, require for ourselves as producers. It doesn't exist. So now we are having to talk about shareholders. Shareholders are in there because of their shares. They have to protect their shares. They are not there for you and me.
True.
That's two. Three, what I've learned is since the merger, all South African projects or producers are to submit their projects to the multi-choice portal.
Yeah.
Right? And it is multi-choice South Africa who has to make the decision.
Yeah.
Not Canal Plus France, because Canal Plus here, multi-choice has a CEO.
Yeah.
David Mignon. He is the CEO. So we have to separate Canal Plus France and Canal Plus in South Africa. So it is here in South Africa where decisions are made for our project. But the merger has, for me, created a disadvantage
Why is that?
between the two entities, Canal Plus France and Canal Plus South Africa or multi-choice, i.e., previously, one could go to Canal Plus in France, submit your project, and be able to be commissioned for licensing in France. Then you come to multi-choice in South Africa and negotiate a deal for either ShowMax or wherever, South Africa or in the continent. But now you only have one option, multi-choice in South Africa. So this merger has disadvantaged us, unfortunately. Thank you very much.
Ramadan, before you go away, so are you saying that you feel that South African producers will get less commissioned? I mean, what are you feeling as a seasoned producer are the implications of that?
Well, currently, the days of multi-choice commissioning 100%, I will say it in inverted commas, are over. Currently, you have to submit with a financial plan. It is what you bring to the table, right? Your financial plan, they will come in, maybe licensing, but you need to show that you have other funds that you are able to bring forth to produce your project. Expecting them to give you X, Y, an amount is not going to happen simply because they want to recoup their 54 billion rands. And they have discovered that multi-choice ShowMax have been bleeding all these years. It is a business entity. When will they recoup 54 billion rands? A lot of money. So we have to suffer, unfortunately, for that buyout of 54 billion.
Okay, do we have any responses to that from anybody? Is it all bad? Shuab, you were saying it's not all doom and gloom. I mean, I think Ramadan makes some very important points. Do you have a response?
Sorry, Jane. Yeah, thank you very much, Ramadan, for that. I mean, unfortunately, as I said a little bit earlier, the initial part of the process would have gone to the initial shareholders of MultiChoice. They would have been given all the opportunities to either accept or reject, the offer that was on the table. They were given really fair value for their shares at the time, and there were also remedies within the Companies Act for any dissenting shareholders. the unfortunate reality here within a corporate environment is that, this is about majority rule, this is minority protection, and the majority voted in favor of the merger. As Tamara also said, they had passed a particular threshold in company law where, in effect, this actually could amount to, in effect, really a takeover, and that this was really an inevitability once it had reached that particular point. In terms of being able to liaise, I think there was a question also about the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. Competition has now fallen under what used to be the DTI.
Yeah.
So, we should also potentially also look to see, we have so many policies which are applicable to supporting local industries, and what have you. Is the state actually meeting those obligations? And how do we actually work with those particular policies in order to actually access that money and make sure that that is actually supplying or being actually driven towards, especially SMMEs. Yeah, I don't have a simple answer to a complex problem. Unfortunately, Ramadan is correct, that we are unfortunately going to now see how this is going to practically also unfold, given and it's going to happen relatively quickly because time is of the essence for them as well.
Do we as the filmmakers have any leverage or ability to influence the situation at all as of this point, sort of April 2026, or are we able to intervene in any way? What can we do?
Look, I would recommend the fact that, engaging with the commission is an excellent starting point. Written submissions regarding looking and creating representations based on evidence about potential risk of cancellations of commissions, breaches of contract, market-related data. Also proposing remedies or interventions which could help create jobs and ensure plurality and diversity. And also, I mean, I commend the Commission for expediting this particular market inquiry, and actually, being proactive around the interventions that they have. Because as Tamara did say, there is this important aspect to public interest harms. And public interest here, unfortunately, I think was also a comment about access to information. Access to information, even with shareholders, doesn't mean that shareholders have access to all information. The Companies Act, and also in terms of contract, it particularly allows them access to particular types of information at particular times. And this has been settled at the Supreme Court of Appeal. So that is not an unusual thing in mergers, particularly mergers of this kind of this nature and scale.
Okay.
What we would say is just is
Yeah.
that monitor the particular issues, and if there are particular areas around discrimination around distribution or market access, vertical or horizontal breaches, then please report that to the Commission.
Hi, yes, I think I'll just quickly jump in. I see, Sophia, you've also got your hand up. But this is for tomorrow. The South African law, particularly the Companies Act, the more recent Companies Act, and read with the Constitution, it's seen a market shift over the years from shareholder primacy, which Shuaib has spoken quite a bit about, towards balancing shareholder interests with broader public interest. So while directors have historically prioritized shareholder wealth, obviously legislation more and more requires consideration of employees and community impact. With this deal, it seems like the legal structure was exploited. For example, what you termed as an elegant solution, Shuaib, of forming License Co. and seemingly placing all the BEE component only within licensing, while allowing all decision-making around content to be left to foreign interests. Now, I'm interested, surely our courts, including the Competition Commission, are employing a more purposeful interpretation of our law. I'm kind of interested to know whether the Competition Commission takes that view. Thanks.
Tamara? Thank you, Amilcar. Thanks
Yeah,
very much.
I mean, I think that was very beautifully put. But this was exactly initially when we were trying to conceptualize what's the rationale behind this and how is this deal going to work. One of the questions we also had to grapple with is like, is License Co sustainable? Kind of what will it do? How will it earn revenue? Is it independent? So those questions, I can't go into much detail about, you know, the what we found, but those questions were very much the crux of our investigation. And in the end, I think we did have some comfort, particularly in terms of License Co itself and its submissions as well about how it would operate, that they would have some independence in terms of what they choose or what they ask to be commissioned, that they themselves would have some ability to decide what will be broadcast, etc. But of course, I don't know, the best laid plans, you know, best made plans. But I suppose the comfort that I want to give is that these questions were ones that plagued us as well. And there was sufficient comfort provided around License Co as an entity having its own financial muscle, its own representatives on its board that could make an independent decision, and that could hold MultiChoice really to account in terms of the content that it wished to broadcast.
Okay. We have another question here. Besides subscriber growth, what else is going to drive revenue, or is that also private and confidential?
Well,
what will drive revenue?
Yeah. I'd be speculating because that really is, you know, that's an operational decision question. Of course, it would be subscriber growth. It's a two-sided market, so linked to that would be advertising, you know, as well. So the more subscribers you have, the greater your advertising revenue. It could also be the scale to translate the scale into some kind of buyer power to allow them to negotiate better licensing agreements, you know, so
right.
Instead of having only Francophone Africa, only Anglophone Africa, if you combine the two, you know, is that kind of footprint, does it give you some leverage to lower the price of obtaining certain rights? But as I said, that would be speculating.
But you are hearing from us tomorrow, you know, the many concerns that the filmmakers have, and we're hoping that you are able to, you know, I don't know, take them back. We, you know, and in some way, you know, we're so happy to have access to you, and we would love that you're able to consider the concerns that people are raising tonight.
Yeah, so it's helpful for me as well. One, I suppose, I now know that when we have these kinds of transactions, I should come to you probably before we agree conditions, because some of these inputs would actually have improved our ability to monitor them. You know, I had this discussion with you before. So that's the one point. But the second one is also exactly in going forward in terms of monitoring, pushing. Sorry,
No worries.
My chest has held up until now. Pushing probably for greater disclosure, but also for these kinds of spend commitments to be broken down into chunks, like Richard said, that would allow the viability of the industry or support the viability of the industry. So those are useful lessons and things that we can also then ask the firms to respond to as we monitor the implementation of the conditions.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Ramadan's points were very, very well taken, you know, because now if South African producers are submitting to MultiChoice South Africa, you know, and he has considerable experience in this area, our options might become increasingly limited, which is problematic. You know, we're the producers of the content. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Dumeko?
Yes, okay. Chairperson, I don't know whether I'm commenting or asking, but
please go ahead, sir.
As somebody who is trying something, we're crafting a documentary, and ShowMax was going to be part of where we're going as we're doing this. I'm trying to check if after negotiations, I've been told that there will be negotiations that will be going on, starting from the meeting of tomorrow. Unfortunately, I logged in very late to this meeting. After 30 minutes, I didn't get a preamble. I didn't get of what was the purpose of the meeting that I'm in. But I'm
Okay.
just checking if maybe now that ShowMax will be moving over, what will be the repercussions thereof? I'm just checking.
Well,
Maybe it may not be answered today, but I'm just checking if I'm in the right place. Thank you.
thank you, sir. I think you are in the right place. We're exploring the situation and what is going on. We've been given quite a lot of information from tomorrow from the Competition Commission, and Canal Plus are apparently creating a platform, a centralized global platform. But we're trying to gather as much information as possible at the moment, and this meeting is being recorded, so you will be able to listen to what's being shared here in April.
Richard's hand is up to respond to Mr. Dumeko.
Sure, Richard?
Yeah, I can partly respond to that, and that is that
Fantastic.
what has been the model for a while now at MultiChoice, I believe previously, some years ago, you used to have different commissioning editors who work for ShowMax, for Mzansi Magic, for CakeNet, etc., across the different channels. That changed, as far as I understand, a few years ago. So now you've got the same commissioning editors who might work kind of horizontally across various channels. So the commissioning editors, the people actually working with the content, are the same at MultiChoice, and a project that might previously have gone towards ShowMax will be redirected towards Mnet or Mzansi Magic or CakeNet or Africa Magic or one of the various other channels as the case may be. So it's not to say that everything that kind of would have fallen under the ShowMax umbrella has completely disappeared. In an ideal world, that all gets redirected to another one of the MultiChoice channels and goes ahead in that format. So that's the hope, is that there won't necessarily be too much disruption there. What is going to make a difference, though, is that the ShowMax viewership, I think, is quite different to the traditional MultiChoice viewership. By MultiChoice, I'm talking about, the Mnet channels and things like that. So I'm not quite sure how they're going to figure that part out. But I think this also speaks to some of the concerns that people had about, who now commissions our content. Does this all take place by someone who's French sitting behind a desk in Paris? My understanding is that that isn't the case. You've still got the same content team in the MultiChoice headquarters in Joburg who are still working with these projects. So, it's not like we're going to suddenly have people who don't understand our local projects and our local relevance who are, pulling the trigger on what gets commissioned, what doesn't.
Okay, thanks, Richard. But you did say the process seems to have slowed down quite a bit.
Yeah, I think that's safe to say. It's definitely been slower, and what I've also noticed that the pipeline doesn't seem to have extended as far. I used to kind of have projects booked up sort of a year in advance, knowing what I'm working on, and it's down to a few months. It used to be what passed for a regular paycheck in our industry, and now it's a lot more precarious. So,
Sure.
that's kind of where we stand.
Okay. Now, going back to the Competition Commission, we have a comment here back for tomorrow that the Competition Commission should always speak with the affected stakeholders, please, prior to approving deals that affect, the very existence of our industry. We would have provided a great deal of input tomorrow that could have allowed for perhaps better crafted conditions. That's a comment from somebody tomorrow.
Yeah,
Your
I
response?
100% agree. I agree. We try, we try to reach out to as many stakeholders as possible. And we also
Great.
publish a list of mergers on our website and update them weekly, just because we don't always know who the representative bodies are. But I
Sure.
100% agree. We should be doing that, and at least now I know that I can reach out to you in future. Yeah.
Fantastic. Carolyn, you wanted to make a point, and then we'll go to Schreiber and Sophia.
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment, and maybe Ramadan could respond to it, since he lived in France and he understands the French system. But as we know, the French are the sort of the, whatever you call them, the kings or the queens of protectionists. They make sure that their creative industry is protected 100%, both from writers, directors, etc. Cineplexes cannot only have American films in it. So CNC, they even charge, they have a levy on, a 5% levy on Netflix for all their subscribers outside of their content that they have to commission in France. And so I'm really keen to understand if we were to engage the CNC, hopefully NFF or the parties that be, since it seems to be more the DFA or other independent organizations that would have to engage the CNC around this matter to see how we could take back some level of control in our country. And also, I'm just interested to know, like Studio Canal, which is obviously more feature films. Ramadan says we can't now go and approach Canal Plus in France. But Studio Canal, obviously, as a feature film commission body or a distributor, what are the opportunities there? Because from what I've heard, they're still open to negotiations. And from what I've heard off the record is from the commissioning editors in France and Canal Plus, they're going to make the decisions, even if we have local commissioning people here. So I'm just interested from a CNC positioning and the protectionist of French culture, Ramadan. Can you talk to that? How we can try to use some of that?
Ramadan, are you here? No. Unfortunately, I think you left. Nadine, can we just ask you, as being from the NFEF, is the NFEF able to approach the CNC in France?
Look, yeah, I heard, of course, Ramadan's inputs and Carolyn, of course. I can't promise anything either, but it's something to raise with my colleagues. I think let's see what more active role the NEVF can play. Yeah, but those points have definitely, been taken, and I think we have to be more vocal.
Yeah, because I think it would be great if the NFEF could talk to the CNC and come back to industry. Carolyn raises some excellent points. Sophia, you had your hand up?
My question was answered, but I'd just like to make a comment in terms of my understanding of what the deal was, and having spoken to people from within MultiChoice at some point in the last couple of months, is that I think as producers, we're putting a lot of hopes on, I think, that 1.2 billion rand that was started in some newspaper article a while back that was going to be invested into content. And I was sort of put straight in terms of the fact that that figure is not a figure that's a content figure. MultiChoice has been in deep trouble, and that the deal currently as it stands with Canal Plus is to really keep the lights on. Of course, they're going to try and get new subscribers and get new content, but I think, as Richard explained, is the wheel is going to turn very slowly. At least for the next year or so, until things shift. So I'm not trying to be doom and gloom, but I think that we have to actively understand the landscape in which we are operating.
Okay.
And I'm not sure what we can do as producers to try and make that wheel turn faster.
Okay, good point. Shuab, you wanted to make a point?
Hi there. Thanks, Jane. I was just thinking about the earlier comment about, the fact that in South Africa we are bound by, ethical standards within the principles of the codes of good conduct. In other words, the King Codes of Corporate Governance. And we are dealing with publicly listed companies listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, which means that the codes are actually mandatory for them. And one of the consequences of that is that these companies must have a social and ethics committee. And this is way beyond, being a good company, donating X to Y, and the like. It's gone way beyond that. And in fact, in the last iteration, King 5, which is now in effect in 2026, the Social and Ethics Committee, its role about its independence, and its impact that it has on the board and reporting to shareholders has actually been emphasized and strengthened. This might be a very good avenue for your bodies to liaise as strategic stakeholders and key partners with the Social and Ethics Committee to actually make your case around how these high-level decisions from a corporate context must be aligned not only with existing law, that includes all the possible legal frameworks, but also how how it will and does have an impact on domestic industry and sustainability. So, because that is directly their mandate. So that would be a suggestion.
No, that's great. That's a great suggestion. Thank you. Do we have any more people that'd like to contribute to this discussion right now?
Can I say something? It's Neil from Storyscope.
Hey, Neil.
It's really great this DFA podcast,
Initiative.
one of the most subscribed podcasts we've ever had, right? And that's really good. The deal with MultiChoice was a slow motion train wreck that was kind of like on the public agenda for a long time. And I think, and now it's here, and it feels like industry is suddenly waking up to the fact that there's problems here. There's been very, very smart legal maneuvering. It's a structure that seems to benefit the French over local production. Globalization has come and really arrived, and now all of a sudden we're going like, what do we do? Okay,
right.
And I think what I'd like to just motivate everyone in this room. I mean, the DFA, which is part of the South African Screen Federation, that does excellent work in lobbying the players that can actually make a difference, right? The Safe Job Coalition, which is an IPO initiative together with DFA and SASFED, made a big fuss at Parliament, at the DTIC, and for that reason, we're in direct negotiations with the DTIC to make sure that the rebate comes back online to benefit our entire ecosystem, right? That includes how it operates, how SVC operates, how the NFF operates, and all of that. So I'd just like to encourage everyone in this room to become more active and support the industry organizations such as the DFA, such as IPO, and such as SASFED, that is an umbrella body that really has the lobbying power and can raise the grassroots anger that I'm sensing in this room around what do we do, and get organized, be involved, be part of the committees, and let's make sure that the NFF, thanks to Nadine, speaks to her colleagues, right? And then we go to CNC, and the work is done. There's no shortcuts. You've got to understand how the deal is structured. You understand how to find the levers of power. You've got to make sure that you put your groups together that the DFA is a key part of, and get involved, because only then can we go like, okay, there's light at the end of the tunnel in what I think the anxiety that every single producer in this room is probably feeling.
Well, I think you're getting a lot of thumbs up to that statement, Neil. So thank you very much for making it. Brilliant. And I think we just need to see, you're getting a lot of thumbs up, need to see a lot more people actually getting involved and helping us lobby the Competition Commission. Tamara, do you have a response to Neil's points? Because he's really articulating what a lot of people are feeling.
Maybe let me answer it in this way. I think a good thing, a good part of our system as the competition authorities is that a lot of our hearings are in public. So the tribunal for this matter, in fact, the actual tribunal hearing was a public hearing. And I think that actually is a space that people should use a lot more. to raise concerns that they have with transactions. Even if they're not addressed, you have a forum to speak, be heard, and it's normally very well covered by business press and others. So I think what I heard him say is use the opportunities that are available, whether that's through your regulators, through Parliament, etc. We, as the Competition Commission, are very open to hearing the views of you are the experts, essentially. Yeah, we might be competition experts, but you are definitely the experts in the sectors that we have to investigate. So I would like to hear more from you when we have these investigations. I think you do need to occupy those spaces. Yeah, so
Okay.
I agree.
Great.
Could I add something there, Jane, as well?
Yeah, of course.
Just to follow on from what Neil was saying and from what Ramadan was saying earlier, and I don't mean to throw in a distraction here, but I think what we're also hearing is a very strong case for getting our public broadcaster functioning correctly again. Ultimately, when it comes down to it, both MultiChoice, Canal Plus, they are companies whose primary cares to their shareholders. And as much as I hate the term, we are content providers. We provide the produce to them. There isn't going to be as much care about the sort of cultural value that things like films and TV made in South Africa bring or that do for our country, things like nation building, all this kind of good stuff. Whereas something like a public broadcast, that is very much part of their mandate. Even if it's a loss-making entity, I think there's still argument to be made for the value of a public broadcaster within any nation. And SABC, unfortunately, is kind of fallen by the wayside. And so we find ourselves pinning all our hopes on MultiChoice. And that's, I guess, is what my point I'm trying to make is part of the problem, is that we've pinned all our hopes on a corporation, and that relationship isn't necessarily reciprocated, because what we're seeing happen is that it's effectively corporate right sizing. As soon as the books got looked at and they see how much money is being spent on ShowMax, and as lovely as it was for me and others to be a beneficiary of ShowMax budgets and we creating content and it's all wonderful, it wasn't sustainable. At some point that was going to end, and unfortunately that time is now. So I guess that's just my main point, is that in some ways this was inevitable. There's no way that a company with shareholders was going to be able to burn through money at the rate that it has. And now we need to look at what are the other alternatives. Where else do we need to be focusing our energies? And maybe rather than just focus too much energy on trying to influence what Canal Plus does, not let up on SABC and try to turn it into a functioning public broadcaster again.
Or can we as producers create our own platforms, guys? Are there any responses to that? Can we create our own platforms? Do we constantly have to go begging with caps in hand? Or Carolyn, I know you have an opinion on that. Can we create our own platforms?
Maritza's had her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Marika?
Yes, hi. I think, Jane, just as a lead up, that's what I wanted to actually address. And again, thank you for everybody who's been here and the importance of that. I think for me, especially as an emerging producer who also goes into distribution, those platforms are important. We can't have anti-competitive behavior and then be stuck as local producers, because obviously we are aware of where the rebates are and our livelihood depends on those rebates. So when you see something like this happens, we know there's a competition, whatever, out there. But then for local filmmakers, when PSP is pushed back, that affects our livelihood. So those are the type of things that worry us as emerging producers, especially from a province like the Eastern Cape, because we've managed to lobby our government to make financing available for Eastern Cape producers. But now if they don't have distribution platforms, we can't action anything. So I think that's the importance of these kind of meetings. And it's a pity that the meeting was full to capacity, because half of those decision makers wanted to hear this conversation.
Okay, it is being recorded, so it is going to be available.
We appreciate that. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you for that point. We have an interesting point here from Boussy-Sizwe, which is that going back to the French case, that the French National Center for Cinema and Moving Image fought Netflix and other global streaming platforms by using a combination of strict regulation, taxation, and legal obligations to force them to fund local production, turning the streamer from being a disruptive threat into a top investor in French content. So, through a series of negotiations and new regulations they enacted around 2021, the CNC won key concessions that guaranteed French producers maintain their independence and receive funding for local stories. So, this is important, and we need the NFEF, please, to be talking with the CNC and, safeguarding our rights and looking at that model. We have a lot of notes in the chat there. And what are the next steps for the Competition Commission at Canal Plus? What are the next things you're going to be doing, Tamara?
Yeah, so we
What's
are
your
in the
time frame?
monitoring. Yeah, so we are in the monitoring phase now. The implementation was last year, November, if I'm not mistaken, October or November. So we continuously ask them for updates on the commitments that they've made, whether that be employment, spend, or the likes. But of course, we do need to allow a significant enough period of time to pass for us to be able to draw inferences about the spend. As I said, integration is challenging. So usually we only get a very good sense of where things are 1 year hence. But on complaints, we are engaging frequently. Yeah.
Frequently. Okay. Okay, we have another message here from Sizwe saying she agrees with Ramadan and Carolyn and Neil and the others that the industry needs to organize. We have structures like SASFED and its member organizations as well as the wider industry. And we as industry need to speak directly to CNC and get them to give us advice and insights. They are open to that. And we need to understand the specific legislation in South Africa that could force Canal Plus and other agents to take us seriously. So I want to ask Shuab if he has any response to that, please.
Yes, I think that's exactly the kind of thing that the filmmakers and the producers and the content creators needs to do. This is an excellent starting point, but it's really about combining efforts as the experts in this particular industry to put forward a case to the various agencies and also government departments, because it isn't just isolated to the private sector. This is a public and private partnership concern. Interestingly enough, I'd like to see what's going to happen with the Department of Trade and Industry, given the fact that this is, now going to have a footprint across the African continent. I don't know. I've started thinking about this from an international trade law perspective. So we'll see how that plays out. But I mean, that might be a step a little bit too far at this stage. But I think this is the right opportunity, the right time to be able to do this and learn from lessons like, the industries in Nigeria, for example, which are phenomenal in the opportunities that they provide.
Well, that's an interesting point about the industry in Nigeria, for example. I mean, there are streaming platforms there, right? I mean, is that a model we should be looking at ourselves? What do you think?
I think there's nothing stopping, this particular industry or this sector from looking at alternative streaming platforms. There's nothing that stops you from doing that. Being able to work with the regulators, work with ICASA, work with the entities that are there to actually give that particular assistance and guidance. In fact, actually, the Competition Commission, and I don't want to speak on behalf of Tamara, would probably be able to assist and give guidance around this. I mean, the particular mandate of the Competition Commission is also there to particularly, give particular assistance, even, programs where entities can apply for, I wouldn't say corporate leniency, but exemptions under Section 10 of the Act, in order to really give those companies which are now owned or controlled by historically disadvantaged persons, to really give them a leg up so that we can create a far more level competitive playing field in a given sector. So those are areas that need to be explored, and I highly recommend that, once the team is set up, that looking at the legislative landscape, identifying the gaps that may also exist, so that you can actually lobby for using the existing framework, but also maybe looking at regulatory change where it's required.
Okay, great.
May I ask a quick question, Shoaib? And I'm sorry if this is a basic one that I should know the answer to already. Are Netflix and other streamers, Amazon Prime, all of those who operate in South Africa, are they subject to ICASA licensing as well? Do they need a broadcast license?
Everyone has to have is regulated in terms of having to be able to actually disseminate the information here. Everyone's also bound by for example, like the Advertising Standards Authority, for example. So that actually controls content. If you look at the Department of Home Affairs, which looks at the Film and Publications Board, it doesn't matter if it's going to be an advert, doesn't matter if it's going to be a full film documentary, everything needs to go through that particular framework as well. So there are all these almost independent bodies housed in different sectors that ultimately they work together. I think that can be better streamlined, which is probably something which can be motivated for, because you now have to work with so many different bodies that have different regulations that meet at different times, that have independent boards with independent rules.
I guess my question is because, I've admired the CNC model for a long time with their 5% levy on all cinemas and streams, all that needs to be put into a local industry, which does amazing things for the French film industry. Which body would it be that would, if we were to lobby them for an amendment to their regulation to say, we would like a 5% as a condition of you having your ICASA license, broadcast license, FPB certification, whatever the case may be, which body would it be that we would lobby in order to bring about that sort of condition?
Okay, that's a good question. It wouldn't be the FPB, because they're about what is it? We advise, we don't.
Right.
their mantra. So that's about actually looking at the content and whether or not it's actually legal and within our jurisdiction. But we may have to look at perhaps the ICASA might be the correct vehicle. But what I can do is I can go and do some homework and I can come back to you with a response to that question, if that'll help.
Would you? That would be fantastic. We'll hold you to that.
Yes. Well, Alette knows where to find me.
That's fantastic.
I think it falls under the DOC, Department of Communications. It falls under.
Yeah, but I don't want to. I'd like to go back and find the exact method and mechanisms, and then give feedback through Alette if that would work for you.
That would be brilliant. And Alette's on the board of the DFA, and we could discuss it at the board. And Bato, did you want to say something? Sorry.
I was just going to add that based on previous research, the organization that was lobbied in the UK was Ofcom, which is their equivalent of ICASA for changes in policy. And then I suppose we could follow a similar route here. So, but as you say, you're going to do the research to find out, Shao.
Okay, guys, we're coming towards the end of the webinar. So I think have we got a plan going forward? We're going to have maybe get a bit more research from Shoaib, and we're going to bring it to the board and think about perhaps how to lobby further. Anybody that's interested, please contact us via the DFA WhatsApp group. Do we have anybody who wants to raise any other burning questions right now while we have Tamara here?
You invited us to the to attend your hearings. Where can we do that? Is it in Joburg, Cape Town, and where do we find the schedule?
We're in none of the above. So we are in Pretoria. The tribunal is based in Sunnyside, Pretoria. There is a calendar on the Competition Tribunal website. Some of the hearings are held virtually, so that is always helpful as well, because then you can of course join from everywhere. But what I'll do is I'll share the links with I don't know, should I share with you, Alette? And then you can share everyone who might be
Yeah,
interested.
brilliant.
That would be great. That would be great. Okay, everybody. I think it's been a really...
Jane, Mr.
Yeah.
Domeko had his hand up for a while.
Chairperson, no. Mine is only a comment to say to Tamara, this is a different field from what I'm going to mention now. But I beg you, Tamara, to not to put this in a situation where we find ourselves to be under NERSA in another fashion. Let this be as independent as much as possible, because then we will be in the doldrums. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that comment. Okay, everybody. Well, anybody else? I think it's been a informative discussion. And I think we've got some ways to think of ways forward. I think also just to say that next week, guys, next Wednesday, we'll be having another webinar, which will be looking into new distribution systems, which may be particularly pertinent. And it'll be on Wednesday because obviously the long Easter weekend is coming up. So yeah, we encourage everyone to share information. The webinar has been recorded. Everybody's made a fantastic contribution. And yeah, please, if you're keen to host, please come forward. If you're not a member of the DFA, please do join. And let's keep talking, let's keep doing things. And yeah, we do have, as the filmmakers and the content creators, we can make things happen ourselves too, as we recently showed with the DTI, where we were toying on the streets. So, and trying to make something happen. But thank you, Richard, and thank you, Shaub, and thank you, Nadine, and thank you, Tamara, especially. We do appreciate it very much. Thanks, guys. Alette, anything to add?
I see there's a call for closing remarks from the panelists.
Okay, sure. Closing remarks? Yes. Fantastic. Richard, closing remarks?
My only closing remark is that one of our strengths, especially as documentary filmmakers, is that I think we are incredibly innovative and resilient as a species. Filmmakers, especially in the documentary field, I don't think we're used to things being handed to us on a platter or necessarily having stable jobs and things like that. And now's the time where we need to lean into that resilience and innovative spirit. So,
fantastic.
With the support and kind of unity of bodies like this, we can make things happen.
Wonderful. Okay, and Shuab?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. It was a pleasure to actually meet with you and engage with the experts in the field. And I am optimistic and I am positive about the future. But I do believe that there is some real work that needs to be done. Because, I mean, this is a business and they are going to be looking at the bottom line. And we need to be cognizant of that fact. Thank you.
Ne'er a truer word was said. Absolutely. And Nadine? Nadine?
Thank you, Jane. I think I definitely leave with some homework after the session. But also to echo the importance of filmmakers joining organizations such as the DFA. So thank you so much.
Thank you. No, thank you. And last word to Tamara. Thank you so much for agreeing to come and talk to us.
And thank you for inviting me. I think this is, one of the reasons why I'm a civil servant is also just to engage and share, I think, that the kind of work that we try to do, particularly as the Competition Commission and particularly to protect vulnerable groups and industries that are under pressure. So I've learned a lot. And I will definitely go away to try and convey these issues to MultiChoice as we engage on the monitoring side. But I'm grateful. Thank you for the opportunity.
Wonderful. That's great. Wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody. And with that, we'll say have a lovely evening and see you next time. Thank you.